This is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're at the Bio CEO and Investor Conference 2019 in New York. With me right now is Gilbert from Rhythm Biosciences. It's a publicly traded company. The symbol is RHY on the ASX. Glenn, welcome to SNNLive.
Thanks very much, Robert. Lovely to be here.
It's great to have you on. So, for our audience, let's start off with an overview of the company, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Rhythm Biosciences is developing a low-cost, affordable blood test for the detection of colorectal cancer or bowel cancer. Bowel cancer is the second biggest killer globally, with over 850,000 people dying per year.
So, what's the history of the company? When did it start, and how did you develop to where you're currently at today?
The company itself has been listed in December 2017 on the Australian Securities Exchange, but that's not where the journey began. The journey began over 15 years ago with Australia's preeminent research body, the CSIRO. They're famous for developing a range of technologies in the biotech space and the like, including Wi-Fi. So there's been over 15 years worth of research being done, and we've now licensed that with full IP control and ownership, and we're now going to be commercialising the test.
So what about your blood test is different than some of your peers out there?
So it's more the type of blood test and the way it's tested. So there are other competitors in the blood test space for bowel cancer. However, they're molecular based predominantly. Now that means you need a special blood draw. Typically at the moment it goes to a central laboratory. And it's a more expensive test, so it doesn't lend itself all that well to mass screening, particularly globally. So our test is blood-based, and it will have a much lower price tag attached.
So where are we at in the clinical development?
So our clinical development pathway is well established, and early 2019 we're going to commence what's an equivalent of a phase 3 clinical trial. So it's a prospective trial that we're expecting to recruit circa 1,000 patients, and we expect that to be complete at the end of 2019. What that will do is it allows us to apply for a CE mark for Europe, and it will also allow for Australian registration via the Therapeutics Goods Administration, which is the regulatory body in Australia.
So what's the size of the target patient market? You mentioned colorectal cancer, correct?
Yeah, so between the US, Europe and Australia, the total market size is 250 million patients. We know over half of them don't actually screen, so early screening for all cancers is the key, particularly for bowel cancer. So bowel cancer, if caught early, has a greater than 90% survival rate and cure rate.
And, for those who may not know, what's the current standard of care for testing for colorectal cancer?
So currently, excluding the US, the standard of care is a fecal immune test, which is a fecal-based test. So typically when the patient or person is over 50, receives a test in the mail, they then have to go to the bathroom, do their thing, and then put it in the fridge and then send it off over multiple days to a centralised laboratory. The challenge with that test is that it only detects blood, which you can get for irritable bowel and hemorrhoids and things like that. The current treatment is then the positive fecal immune test or a FIT test. It then goes for a colonoscopy, which can be much, much more expensive, around the $2,000 to $5,000 mark. In the US, screening via colonoscopy is the preferred method, with far less doing the fecal test. But with that becomes a huge cost association, but we'll be able to alleviate with our test.
So let me ask, is there no blood test available currently to test for colorectal cancer?
There is a blood test, and there are several blood tests that are out, but they are molecular tests, and they haven't quite spanned across to Australia and Europe as yet. So they're predominantly based in the US to date.
So when it comes to the regulatory approval process, can you get a concurrent approval in Australia and also in the US?
Yeah, so that can be the case, and that's something that we'll be looking to do. So we'll be bringing forward our US clinical development program to work with the FDA in terms of which trial design and working on what suits their needs, particularly because that gears up for reimbursement. There's also another pathway via the CLIA lab, CLIA, that will allow for early revenue for us to be generated, plus generate US patient data, which will form part of the regulatory package. So we'll be performing a clinical trial in due course, circa 2020 for the US.
And what's your background? I mean, how did you come into all this?
Well, I've had a wide and diverse background. So my background comes from more of an operational background. So manufacturing, supply chain, operations, quality assurance, understanding the regulatory environment, and then slowly adding on product development, commercialisation, BD. So successfully increased other businesses' market cap and valuations through business development and executing on business initiatives.
And from what you can tell me, what are some of the company's growth drivers now moving forward?
Yeah, so it'll be commencing our clinical trial. So since it was listed, Rhythm has hit every single milestone that it has promised the market, and that's our intention to continue to do so. So commencing the clinical trial, which will be Q1 this year, will be a big step in the company's history, taking a step change away from a typical R&D based company. Further to that will be verification tests that we'll be doing, and the conclusion of our clinical trial known as Study 7 towards the end of the year, and then filing, of course. Approvals in CE for the CE mark and the TGA shouldn't be too arduous, and we expect to get that within 6 months.
And where can our audience go and find more information about Rhythm Biosciences?
You can look at us up on www.rhythmbio.com.
My name is Robert Kraft, and I'm coming to you live on SNNLive, and we're at the Bio CEO and Investor Conference 2019 in New York. With me again has been Glenn Gilbert from Rhythm Biosciences, publicly traded company. The symbol is RHY on the ASX. Glenn, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks very much, Robert.